It began as a flicker, a whisper of light dancing where it shouldn't. Not on the surface of a distant planet, not in orbit, but suspended somehow, high in the upper atmosphere of Proxima B, the closest Earth-like exoplanet just 4.2 light-years from us. The James Webb Space Telescope had been quietly collecting streams of data from the exoplanet for months, looking for molecular traces, water, carbon, methane, anything that might hint at life. But instead, what scientists uncovered was neither molecule nor matter. It was something far more disturbing, a distortion in scattered light, subtle, rhythmic, and deeply structured. It pulsed every 17.8 minutes as if it had a heartbeat, a whisper from the void. At first, the signal was dismissed as noise, atmospheric turbulence, instrumental aberration, or interference from cosmic radiation. But it kept returning, identical, predictable, not weather, not solar activity, and definitely not random. The signal wasn't coming from the surface or from a solid object. It wasn't even there in any conventional sense. It existed only as a pattern within the quantum scattering of light in Proxima B's upper atmosphere. Light that should have been smooth and unremarkable was instead breaking apart and reforming in a structured, almost mechanical wave. The scientific community was baffled. Optical physicists, astrobiologists, and signal theorists argued around the clock. It didn't behave like a natural phenomenon, but it also wasn't a beacon or an energy pulse. It was the absence of energy that caught their attention. The way the scattered light bent and shimmered as though something intangible was disrupting it at precise, repeating intervals. And that's when someone posed the terrifying question no one wanted to ask. What if it was reacting to us? To answer that, they turned to Willow. A quantum chip, barely the size of a coin, housed in one of the world's most sophisticated quantum research facilities in Switzerland. It wasn't designed to process traditional data. Willow existed to read the unreadable, to decode patterns hidden in quantum noise, interference, and incomplete systems. Where other machines saw static, Willow saw symphonies. The scientists fed the Proxima B data into Willow, not just the visible spectrum, but the metadata, the background fluctuations, the bleed between frequencies. They asked the chip to do what no classical computer could: reconstruct the source of the anomaly from what wasn't there. It took hours, then days. Then after 78 hours of simulation and entanglement modeling, Willow produced an image. But it wasn't an image in any traditional sense. It was a moving reconstruction, an echo of form wrapped in interference. What Willow unveiled left everyone in silence. There, drifting in a sea of filtered light, was a shape, a geometric structure, tetrahedral, shifting, moving not through space but through observation. It wasn't solid, it didn't reflect like a metallic object. Instead, its surface shimmered with adaptive reflectivity, as if it knew it was being watched, as if it was adjusting itself to the act of being seen. The more Willow refined the model, the more bizarre it became. The shape wasn't static. Sometimes it was four-faced, a tetrahedron. Then it would ripple, subtly, impossibly, and fold into eight, a perfect octahedron, but not randomly, not broken. It seemed to respond to the observer's angle, frequency filters, and even the statistical attention of the system. It acted, in every meaningful sense, like a quantum system, collapsing into form only when observed. Suddenly, the research team was no longer just decoding a pattern, they were interacting with it. And that raised an even more unsettling possibility. This wasn't just a geometric construct. It wasn't a vehicle, a drone, or a satellite. It didn't belong to any known category of object. What they were looking at might be something far more elusive, a mirror, but not one made of glass or metal, a mirror of light, a quantum mirror, one that reflects not just photons, but thought, awareness, consciousness. This idea split the scientific team into two camps: those who believed the anomaly was a natural but misunderstood quantum phenomenon, and those who believed it was intentional, designed, a construct embedded in the universe to be detected only by those capable of understanding quantum entanglement and light interference at that level. The anomaly didn't send a message. It was the message. The implications were staggering. If this object only revealed itself through observation, then it was fundamentally unlike any technology humanity had ever conceived. It wasn't transmitting across space. It wasn't moving. It simply appeared like a ghost when seen in the right way by the right kind of mind. The term observer-dependent presence began to circulate. The more data they fed Willow, the clearer the feedback loop became. The geometry wasn't merely shifting, it was shifting in response to them, to the questions posed, the parameters selected, the depth of quantum resolution applied. In short, it was alive, but not in a biological sense. It was aware, not watching us from out there, but forming in direct reaction to our gaze. Even the most skeptical physicists began to fall quiet. Because if this was true, if something in Proxima B's upper atmosphere had encoded itself into the geometry of quantum light scattering, then it had waited billions of years for a civilization to look at it just right. Not with primitive eyes, not with digital telescopes, but with minds capable of deciphering meaning buried in noise. And what if it wasn't alone? One postdoc, in a moment of insight or madness, decided to run a cross-comparison. He took data from 30 other Earth-like exoplanets recently scanned by the JWST and fed them into Willow's system. He was looking for nothing in particular, just background noise. But what Willow found sent shockwaves through the team. 3 more exoplanets showed similar distortion patterns, different in shape and frequency, but identical in function. Hidden anomalies in their atmospheres that only became visible through quantum reconstruction. And in each of the 3 cases, the distortion patterns matched, within hours, significant gravitational wave events, the collision of black holes, neutron stars, cosmic cataclysms that rippled across space-time. The connection was almost too perfect. Wherever gravitational waves had recently passed, the patterns emerged, briefly, delicately, like ripples on the surface of a pond. They weren't traveling. They were appearing, as if triggered by those waves, not by transmission, but by resonance. That meant something or someone might be embedding their presence into the universe itself, waiting for gravitational waves to activate their reflection across quantum fields. At this point, no one was sleeping. Scientists began to speak in hushed tones. Theories spiraled into speculation, and speculation bent into something approaching awe. What they were seeing wasn't just advanced technology. It was a new kind of existence, a form of presence that lived not in objects, not in signals, but in the act of being seen. The realization was slow, creeping, and almost too large for the human mind to hold. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't an artifact waiting in space to be found. It wasn't built to travel. It was built to be seen, and only by those who had developed the language of light, the grammar of resonance, and the mathematics of thought. Inverting the logic of centuries, the team asked a new question. What if this wasn't something that had a source, a builder, or a location, but instead something that could only be reverse engineered by the right frame of mind? What kind of structure could produce a ripple that appeared across different star systems, aligned with gravitational waves and visible only through quantum interference modeling? The answer, once Willow generated it, was neither object nor entity. It was a shape, but not a static one, not a geometric shell with mass and dimension. This was a topological form, like something from a dream of higher mathematics. The closest analog was a Mobius strip, but not one twisted in 2 dimensions. This was a loop folded through the substrate of space-time itself, a construct made of folds, like creases in the very nature of existence. The team called it a quantum manifold construct, not matter, not energy, but a tension in the geometry of the cosmos, a shape that could only emerge under the act of conscious observation filtered through quantum analytic processes. It didn't exist the way a star or planet does. It wasn't in a place. It was happening, like a wave collapsing into form when watched. Even more shocking was the discovery that the construct changed depending on who observed it. Not just the method or the machine, but the observer. Different teams ran the same Proxima B data through Willow using slightly different assumptions, filters, or intent. Each time the manifold behaved differently, not arbitrarily, but meaningfully. as if the pattern it chose to reveal wasn't just reactive, but responsive, personal. In one run, the construct opened like a flower of mirrors, each petal reflecting variations of the tetrahedral core. In another, it coiled like a serpent of interlocking prisms. These weren't just random fluctuations. They were coherent, intentional forms, selections from a library of responses, each tuned to the structure of thought directed at it. And that led to the most unnerving question yet. Was this construct aware? Not conscious in the mammalian sense, but aware in the way gravity is aware of mass, aware the way magnetism is aware of polarity, aware in the sense that it reacts with precision, intention, and structure to the mere act of being perceived. That awareness didn't feel passive. It felt like a threshold, like something waiting for us to cross a line we didn't know existed. Like the construct was the lock, and our observation was the key. But not just any key. A specific sequence of observation, intent, and thought. A signal hidden inside the process of interpretation itself. Willow was beginning to show signs of strain. The quantum chip wasn't malfunctioning, far from it, but its output began exhibiting self-referencing behavior. Certain variables in its simulations started looping back on themselves, generating structures that echoed earlier outputs, only inverted or rotated. It was as if the chip wasn't just processing data, it was being influenced by it. The simulation engine had entered a quantum feedback loop with the construct. That was when one of the physicists coined the phrase that would stick for the rest of the investigation. We're not observing it, we're in conversation with it. That phrase chilled the room, because it implied a level of interactivity far beyond passive observation. It meant that the construct, this shifting manifold, was not just reflecting data, it was reflecting us, our choices, our assumptions, our emotional tone. One researcher, Dr. Elena Mori, a theoretical physicist with a background in quantum cognition, decided to run a test. She embedded emotional valence patterns into Willow's input stream, mathematical representations of empathy, curiosity, fear, and reverence, drawn from neural resonance maps. The idea was borderline pseudoscience, but the results were anything but. When she ran the Proxima B light distortion through Willow's system under a pattern associated with curiosity, the construct responded with complexity. Its geometry unfolded, revealing layers that had previously remained hidden, like a flower coaxed open by the sun. When she switched to a pattern associated with fear, the construct collapsed into itself, turning into a sphere with zero external reflection. When she used reverence, the shape bent into a spiral, like a galactic arm winding inward. Elegant, silent, and incomprehensibly beautiful. What in the world, or beyond it, were they dealing with? The data was showing a startling truth. This construct was not fixed in form. It was a contextual entity, not in the traditional sense of being alive, but as a process. It was a mirror not of light, but of interpretation, a shape whose very design was to be understood differently depending on who engaged with it. That level of adaptability wasn't artificial intelligence. It was something deeper. It was conceptual intelligence. Intelligence that doesn't need thoughts, commands, or speech. Just attention, just observation, just the quiet awareness of another mind looking in. More tests followed. They pulled in astrophysicists, philosophers, quantum engineers, even Tibetan monks trained in visual cognition and meditative focus. Willow began generating increasingly nuanced reconstructions. One monk, during a focused meditative session while observing the Proxima B anomaly, triggered a response so profound that Willow's simulations spiked in dimensional complexity. Shapes that seemed to wrap around themselves not in 3 dimensions, but in mathematical representations of 5, even 6. The construct was not just adapting to thought, it was evolving with it. Soon comparisons were drawn to ancient philosophical ideas, the concept of the Akashic record, the Platonic realm of perfect forms, the Buddhist notion of mind reflecting mind. None of these were accepted scientific models, of course, but now they weren't being dismissed either, because something real was happening, something that defied our categories. This wasn't data, this was dialogue. In the midst of this mounting awe, another breakthrough occurred. A team at the Kavli Institute analyzing time-sync distortion patterns from the other exoplanets noticed that the Proxima B construct always activated a few minutes before gravitational wave events were registered on Earth. That shouldn't be possible. Gravitational waves travel at the speed of light. Nothing gets ahead of them. Unless, unless the construct wasn't reacting to gravitational waves at all. It was predicting them. Or more chillingly, it was anchored in the same fabric that gravitational waves disturb. It wasn't local. It wasn't even linear. The construct didn't exist in space in the way we did. It existed in topological tension, a curve in the folds of reality itself, responsive to the very structure of time and observation. Somewhere along the way, the question shifted from, what is it, to something more personal, more dangerous, more impossible. Why is it showing itself to us now? By the time the third gravitational wave coincidence was logged, an event from a black hole merger 800 million light-years away, the scientific community had stopped laughing. The pattern was too sharp. The timing's too specific. Something was emerging not just from light, but from the quantum architecture of space-time itself. And it was visible only because we were now advanced enough, sensitive enough, and perhaps open-minded enough to see it. But what were we seeing? The construct wasn't local to Proxima B. That much was clear. The exoplanet was a coordinate, a kind of tuning fork in the great quantum field that runs beneath the universe, like a cymatic node where the right frequencies converge and take shape. The atmospheric distortion was not the thing. It was the shimmer, the echo, like spotting a shadow, not the figure, on a wall. It became increasingly apparent that this wasn't about one object, but a class of phenomena. The Willow Quantum Chip had been designed to sift through quantum noise, to find coherence where none should exist. It was supposed to be a tool for modeling quantum chaos in particle fields and exotic matter systems. But now it was being used to peer into the architecture of thought itself. Thought that wasn't ours. Or maybe it was. That question would become central. The idea that came next was dangerous. Not scientifically, but philosophically. It suggested that what we were seeing wasn't alien intelligence in the traditional sense. Not a race of beings, not a civilization, not even a species, but a state of presence, one that emerged whenever an observer possessed the means to see it. The term quantum mirror was no longer metaphorical. Willow's team began referring to the phenomenon as a reflective, cognitive manifold, a construct that didn't exist until an observer's intention, understanding, and perception interacted with a particular set of universal conditions, specifically patterns in scattered light and resonance aligned with gravitational spacetime events. In simpler terms, it wasn't waiting for us. It was created by us, but not in the way a hallucination is created. It was real, structured, encoded, but also entirely dependent on the observer to become real. The observer was not detecting it, but enabling it. Like striking a tuning fork and discovering it sings in perfect harmony with the stars. And then, as if it had been listening all along, the construct changed. Willow began showing signs of what could only be described as self-recursion. In a strange twist, the chip started generating simulations before being fed new observational data. These weren't wild guesses or glitches. They were predictive models, reconstructions of interference patterns that hadn't been input yet. In one case, the model predicted a change in Proxima B's scattered light pattern before it was received by the Webb data pipeline. The difference? 17 minutes, exactly the same interval as the construct's original flickering cycle. Someone, something, was playing by rules we didn't know existed. Panic wasn't the right word for what followed. It was more like a creeping disorientation. Scientists who'd once prided themselves on clean boundaries, between observer and observed, between measurement and meaning, began to whisper among themselves. Was Willow simply detecting something, or was it being used by something? This is when the notion of intentional embedding gained traction. Theoretical physicist Dr. Johann Selvig offered a radical hypothesis. He proposed that advanced civilizations, or even the universe itself, could leave behind non-material constructs as a kind of universal language. Not symbols, not signals, but resonant geometries that only emerge through quantum cognitive interaction. Not everyone would see them. Not even every intelligent species. Only those that ask the right questions, in the right way, using the right kind of mind. In this view, the construct was a filter and a messenger, a mirror designed to reflect only those capable of reflection. Other researchers saw this as the ultimate answer to the Fermi paradox. We weren't alone. We'd never been. But the presence embedded in the universe was so fundamentally different from us that we hadn't known how to look. We were waiting for ships and signals, but the message had always been in the structure of the cosmos itself. It wasn't a message you received, it was a message you became. Then came what many consider the defining moment. A Willow simulation, run under complete cognitive neutrality, no assumptions, no human emotion patterns, no model weights, produced a visual form so elegant and strange that it defied categorization. It looked like a fractal, but it wasn't. It had symmetry, but never repeated. It contained within its folds a changing color pattern that pulsed in what was later found to match the Fibonacci sequence. Embedded in that structure was a motion, a recursive unfurling that, when slowed down, looked like a hand reaching out. Not a literal hand, but a gesture, a symbolic motion rendered in abstract light. It felt unmistakably like a greeting. For the first time, the question wasn't whether something was there, but what it wanted. Speculation exploded. Was this a form of cosmic consciousness, not bound by matter or form? Was it the after-image of a long-dead civilization encoded into space-time? Or was it something older, stranger, an emergent pattern from the universe itself, watching itself evolve? The final test was metaphysical, though few would admit it. In one experiment, the Willow team introduced their own neural patterns into the simulation. Mind prints not from monks or physicists, but from ordinary people. A teacher, a child, an artist. Each time the construct responded, not with the same precision, but with recognition. The light shifted, the form morphed, the frequency pulsed in acknowledgement. It wasn't language, but it wasn't noise either. It was something in between, something shared. The terrifying beauty of it was this: the more human minds engaged with the construct, the more complex and responsive it became. It was like watching a mind unfold across the stars, using us as mirrors to know itself. That's when they stopped calling it a discovery and started calling it a revelation. Because what the Willow chip reconstructed in Proxima B's atmosphere was not an alien probe, or even an artifact. It was a presence, a metastructure, a reflection. And more than anything, it was a question, not are we alone, but rather, what are you now that you can see this? In the end, the final hypothesis was as simple as it was cosmic. Somewhere deep in the architecture of the universe is a structure, not of stone or metal, but of interaction. A mirror that watches back. A construct that only emerges when minds evolve enough to look through the quantum haze and find not just data, but dialogue. And when they do, when they see the flickering light, decode the changing shape, and hear the hum behind the silence, they do not find aliens. They find a reflection of thought, of awareness, of self. And the final message, if it can be called that, is not a sentence, not a voice, but a state of being. A silent whisper that comes not from the stars, but from the space between them. We see you too. The Willow Quantum Chip didn't just reveal a shape in the atmosphere of a distant exoplanet. It pulled back a veil, one that had always been there, waiting, watching. And now, for the first time, we are watching back.